nation of Israel was created in 1948 after the UN voted to split the British Mandate of Palestine into two states, one Arab and one Jewish. For Jewish people, it was a long-awaited victory, having seen Israel as their spiritual home and promised land for thousands of years. But for the Arab Palestinians who lived there, 1948 saw them lose land they'd owned for generations. To them, it's known simply as the catastrophe. Since then, the bloody battle over this thin strip of land has claimed tens of thousands of lives and continues to dominate global politics. Israel sits in the Middle East, 5 hours direct from Manchester, and we begin our journey in the coastal town of Haifa, which saw the British depart 60 years ago. As we landed came the news that 8 young Jews had been killed in a shooting in Jerusalem. Immediately you can kind of see the contradictions of it as a country. It's incredibly beautiful, it feels really tranquil, everybody's really friendly. We're here in Haifa in the north, where just a couple of years ago the rockets were coming over from Lebanon, and just no sign of that now. Yesterday when we were leaving the UK, all the front pages were about how it's the worst humanitarian crisis down in Gaza for 40 years. And then immediately when we arrived last night at the hotel, we find out there's been a shooting at a religious training college in Jerusalem. So straight away there's that sense of contradiction, but also of danger, really. In 1948, the town of Haifa opened its port to Jews who had escaped the horrors of the Holocaust. Our hotel manager's parents had left Germany.
I thought and I believe very much in Israel, because we are very little but we are very strong. My father said that this is the place for the Jewish people, not any place in the world. And my children also. They don't think about other countries, only of Israel.
This is home.
This is the home. This is the home of all the Jewish people.
The belief that this land was promised by God unites Jews from around the world, inspired by a sense of pride and protection. I was joined by John Jeffey, a journalist from the Manchester Evening News who regularly visits Israel. It was important to me to gain a greater understanding of this unique sense of identity, but also to explore my own faith as a Catholic. Israel holds the land where Jesus was born, lived and died, and from Haifa we drove to the sleepy town of Nazareth.
I've been to Israel many times and I've seen the sites of Jewish interest, but I've never before been to Nazareth.
Yeah.
And I know that you've dined to come here. Tell me what it is what it means to you.
Well, you kind of think of it being Jesus of Nazareth. This was his home. This was like what Sale is to me. This was his part of the world. It's where Mary lived, and it's also down there is apparently where the angel Gabriel first appeared to her and said, you know, you will be carrying the child of God, where, you know, you will be the bearer of the Immaculate Conception. I couldn't believe I was walking through the streets that Jesus did as a child, running through the markets and being told off for being cheeky to his elders. And just a few miles east is the Sea of Galilee, where Christians believe some of the most famous miracles took place. And it feeds into the River Jordan, where Christian pilgrims follow Christ in being baptised.
Oh, it's quite something to see. I mean, people get very worked up, and particularly people from America. You can hear now, maybe you can hear people yelling when they go in the water.
Right, there we go. On cue, how did you set that up? Every year 500,000 pilgrims visit this site, and it feels a million miles from the violent images we see on TV. Alan works side by side with Palestinians who he describes as his brothers. What did he think of the bloody events in Jerusalem the night before?
What happened in Jerusalem is what happened in Gaza. You know, I mean, all the time they're sending over Katyusha to us and expecting us not to retaliate. And when we do, this is what happens. Unfortunately, it's gone on for far too long. It's just the fact that people from abroad think that the whole country is at war and don't come, which is very sad.
I was beginning to understand the sanctuary Israel provides for some Jewish people who need a place to feel safe and accepted.
I was the only Jew in the whole school, and I had a hard time when I was young with anti-Semitism, unfortunately. You know, my family came here in 1947 in the beginning. That's probably what motivated me to come here. And they helped set up the country. And they gave their lives to this country.
Now, thankfully, we Catholics don't have to immerse ourselves fully in the water. We're just renewing our baptism vows. I'm going to fill up my bottle for my granddad, who will be delighted to have some holy water from the River Jordan. Leaving the River Jordan, I felt a bit shell-shocked. The places I'd imagined didn't match the reality. But with everything I saw and everyone I met, Israel continued to surprise me. I wanted to find out what life was like for new immigrants who'd taken the leap of faith, and John took us to meet his brother's family who'd moved to Israel from Manchester just a few months earlier.
We've just arrived and we were supposed to do some interviews before the sunset, but we're a little bit late, so everyone's in a mad dash now to get all the chores out of the way before the sun sets. So we're a little bit in the way, but nobody seems to mind.
When the Sabbath begins, all work stops, including shaving and even tearing kitchen towel.
It's a time of rest for us, and recuperation, and prayer, and family time, and lots of nice stuff. But no to things like watching television and going shopping and driving your car and handling money and all the things that are very loosely described as work, but work's not really the right word for it. That's just the most approximate term that we can come up with for it.
You've got changed, yeah.
I'm altering a time switch now because we're not allowed to turn the oven on and off during the Sabbath.
How big a decision was it to leave your family at home and decide to move out here?
Not really such a big decision. I think Jews today live at a very unique time because, I mean, for hundreds and hundreds of years, thousands of years, Jews stand there 3 times a day praying and saying, we'd like to return to Zion, and to kind of have that privilege today of actually being able to do it. It seems that, it might be a great life here. We might decide that we'd like to live in England instead, but, it seems a bit contrary not to give it a try, living in these strange times.
If you don't go when you're 20 or like approaching 30, where you still have some kind of idealism left, I think it's kind of hard to then go because, people can weigh things up and weigh things up and weigh things up, and then they don't go.
We just crossed into Palestinian-controlled Bethlehem. We came through the gates down there. We weren't allowed to film because there was border control, and our Jewish guide wasn't allowed in. The Israeli government don't allow them in. It's the first time really we've felt that kind of tension that we anticipated.
I needn't have been so worried about crossing into Palestinian territory. There's an instant shift in atmosphere. It feels slightly chaotic and disorganised, but full of life. My Palestinian guide dragged me by the hand through a back exit into the Church of the Nativity. I couldn't imagine getting away with that on the Israeli side of the wall. As a Christian, Bethlehem was the place I'd been most excited about visiting. The beautifully tender story of the Nativity is the first I ever learnt.
We're just in the stable where Christ was born. He was born over where that star is over there, and the baby was brought here. But there's something, again, really distasteful about the whole situation. It's people pushing and shoving each other to get to the front, and it really takes something away from how sacred it should be. There's something a little bit sad about this church at Bethlehem, and it's not just the sort of commercial aspect to it, because you kind of expect that in an area that's got a lot of poverty, but the fact that our guide, who's Christian Palestinian, doesn't feel comfortable talking about it on camera, a Christian feeling uncomfortable talking about it, living and working in Bethlehem, is tragic.
Bethlehem is home to Palestinian Christians, but while they made up 15% of the population in 1950, that figure has dropped to just 2%. From where Jesus was born, it's just a few miles west to the place where he died. In the Garden of Gethsemane, an olive tree stands, so old it may have been there the night that Jesus was betrayed and arrested.
Just got really upset, and I think it's been, we've sort of been doing a bit of a whistle-stop tour around, and then coming here's really got to me. And I don't really know why.
It's a bit overwhelming.
I think if it's a story that you believe, and if you have believed, this is the place where he ultimately knew that he was going to die, and it's the way I've pictured it. And places that went to yesterday, it's not really been, but this is kind of how I imagined it would be.